Die Gedanken sind frei.
My thoughts freely flower.
Die Gedanken sind frei.
The purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
Hello, my name is Hugh Henry. Welcome to Freethought Forum. Today we're going to talk about religions without gods. We always think of God or gods when we speak of religion, but some religions don't have gods, or don't usually have gods, or don't pay much attention to them. Examples: some shamanism, Aminism, Taoism, some Buddhism, Confucianism. We're going to take a long look at Taoism and Buddhism. But first, let's talk about the origin of gods. There's an anthropologist named Colin Turnbull who gave me the insight I will give you. Turnbull wrote two famous books. One was The Forest People in 1968, which is about the most delightful group of people you could ever imagine living in perfect harmony with their environment. They were pygmies in a forest in Africa. 10 years later, he came back for his next study, and he wound up writing about the most awful people and just how low human beings could sink in a book called The Mountain People. But from these, I have this insight. When a hunter-gatherer has a bad day, he doesn't eat. When he has a really bad day, he gets maimed. If he has a catastrophic day, he dies. But when a farmer has a bad day, hail, drought, locusts, or how about the kingdom next door? Death, slavery. In one day, everyone he knows, his entire universe, his family, his friends, his whole community, wiped out. Or it will be determined that during the course of the year they will die slowly of starvation. Farmers need big juju. They need big gods and goddesses. Hunter-gatherers don't especially have gods or goddesses. Now, forest spirits, ancestors, and to a greater extent, gods do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Today we call on God mainly in time of war, in disaster, to save a life, to save your own life. But we are actually hunter-gatherers in the mall. Some have invented new gods. For instance, there is now a goddess of parking named Squat. Squat looks like a meter maid in a short, stout, tight uniform. And if you ever really need a parking place, pray to Stout and you'll get one. I've done it, it works. Now, Stout requires a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is puns. And if you sacrifice a pun to Stout, you must never use it again. She was discovered by Isaac Bonowitz, a prominent pagan writer. And as I said, she works. But let's start something more serious. Let's go with Taoism. Now, the principal scripture of Taoism is the Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way. The person that wrote it we don't know if he was real. His name is Lao Tse, from 550 to 480 BCE. And there's a wonderful story about how this book came about. He was very well known in China, and he realized that the government was going to hell in a handcart and it was time to leave. So he gets to the border guard, who knows him, and the border guard says, "Master, since you're leaving us, could you give us something?" He says, "Sure." So he sits down, he writes up a few things, and disappears from history. That's the origin of this holy book. I think that's delightful. Let me read you pieces of this. The master doesn't try to be powerful, thus he is truly powerful. The ordinary man keeps reaching for power, and he never has enough. The master does nothing, yet he leaves nothing undone. The ordinary man is always doing things, and yet many more left to be done. The kind man does something, yet something remains undone. The just man does something and leaves many things undone. The moral man does something, and when no one responds, he rolls up his sleeves and uses force. When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith, the beginning of chaos. Therefore, the Master concerns himself with the depths, not the surface. He has no will of his own. He dwells in reality and lets all illusions go. This, by the way, is a very modern translation, so you'll see modern words used here. The gentlest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. This shows the value of non-action. Teaching without words, performing without actions, that is the Master's way. In pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. The less and less you need to force things until finally you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. True mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. If you want to be a great leader, you must learn to follow the Tao. Stop trying to control. Let go of fixed plans and concepts. The world will govern itself. The more prohibitions you have, the less virtuous people will be. The more weapons you have, the less secure people will be. The more subsidies you have, the less self-reliant people will be. Therefore, the Master says, I let go of the law, and people become honest. I let go of economics, and people become prosperous. I let go of religion, and people become serene. I let go of all desire for the common good, and the good becomes common as grass. When a country is in harmony with the Tao, the factories make trucks and tractors. When a country goes counter to the Tao, warheads are stockpiled outside the cities. There is no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend yourself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. When the superior man hears of the Tao, he immediately begins to embody it. When an average man hears of the Tao, he half believes it, half doubts it. When a foolish man hears of the Tao, he laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao. Thus it is said, the path into light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct path seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest art seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. The Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things. Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out the window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The Master arrives without leaving, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing. All right, so how does this non-action nonsense work? The finest example I can think of is Maya Lin and the Vietnam Memorial. Now, Maya Lin did not realize that she was doing anything Taoist here. Other people who knew about it told her. But she had an upbringing from people who believed in Taoism and let things happen, and that permeates all her work. And the Vietnam Memorial doesn't lead, doesn't instruct, doesn't even suggest. The Vietnam Memorial allows. She has other memorials to her credit. The Montgomery, Alabama Civil Rights Memorial, Let the Waters Roll Down. She no longer does memorials because they were getting to be her shtick, so now she's accepted other contracts. But still, all of her architecture is the kind of thing that allows, it doesn't lead. Please notice, in Taoism, no gods, no God, no souls. Now let's talk about Buddhism. It comes in lots of varieties. Zen Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, the Buddhism of Buddha's great tooth and his gigantic footprint. But let's go back to the basics, where it started. Buddha was a man, always said he was. He was not a god. He was not a messenger or prophet of God. He claimed that any human being could become a Buddha. He was born Siddhartha Gautama, 5th or 6th century BCE, to a king of a small kingdom at the base of the Himalayas. There was a prophecy that he would be a universal king or a religiously enlightened being. Well, his father knew what he wanted of that two choices, so he took extraordinary care to isolate his son from anything that would get him involved in religion. He was so isolated that he's 25, and he's first getting outside the palace. He's married, he has children, and he has the famous 4 encounters. He meets a really aged man. He's never seen one of those. He meets a really sick person. He's never seen one of those. He sees a corpse in a funeral. He was protected from ever seeing that. And finally, he sees a wandering ascetic. Well, that does it. That's all she writes. He leaves his wife and child and spends 5 years with various religious teachers, being much admired. Then he spends 5 years as a particular type of religious ascetic which attempts to learn truth by discarding his body completely, abusing it. And he almost starves to death, and he realizes this isn't getting anywhere. He had a lot of admiration among that crowd, and when he quit, they said, quitter. So he has a meal at 35, and he says, I think I know enough, I can figure it out tonight. So he sits down under a fig tree, sits all night, and in the morning, he's the Buddha, the awakened or enlightened one. Well, his friends say, this is wonderful stuff, you need to teach this. He says, how can I teach anybody what they already know? He said, they're not that simple. So for the next 45 years, he teaches. This is Freethought Forum. My name is Hugh Henry, and we're talking about religions without gods. So what was he teaching? Buddha's 4 noble truths. 1, the truth of suffering, or dukkha. All worldly sentient experience, all experience save enlightenment itself, has the character of suffering or pain. Gods, if they exist, also suffer. To a Buddhist, they would just be another class of sentient beings. What the Buddhists mean by suffering includes both the pain of conventional, physical, or psychic sorts, and what we call pleasure. Even the most joyful and seemingly rewarding of human experiences, the love between a parent and child, are classified as dukkha. Why? Because they stop. And when they stop, it's painful. The core meaning of dukkha is the notion that all things are transient or impermanent. Second, the truth of the arising or cause of suffering. Dukkha is not an arbitrary characteristic of experience. It is not the result of mere accident or chance, nor is it a condition inflicted by a cruel and inexplicable fate or by the inscrutable will of a deity. Rather, it has causes, and these causes can be understood. The immediate cause of suffering is compulsive desire or craving. Note the cause lies not in the external world, but is found within, in the mind and will. As with suffering itself, so with craving, it too has comprehensible causes. Indeed, there's a long chain of causation leading to suffering. The ultimate cause of suffering is ignorance, the failure to see things as they really are. Third, the truth of the cessation of suffering. Suffering may be overcome. It may be made to cease. The cessation of suffering is what the Buddhists call nirvana. It is the ultimate goal of Buddhism. Nirvana is utterly ineffable, beyond the reach of language and concept. Nirvana is not to be understood as mere self-extinction. So how do you get there? 4, the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Although it is most commonly divided into 8 components, it may more simply be divided into 3 disciplines. First, morality, ethical discipline. Under this heading, we find the 5 basic moral rules against killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and intoxication. The purpose or practical rationale of morality in Buddhism is pragmatic. That is to say, the moral rules are to be obeyed because they work. Obeying them tends to liberation. If you do these things rather than refrain from doing them, you won't like yourself. Second, concentration and collectedness. This is the arts and sciences of meditation. For example, breathing techniques, postures, mental exercises, mystical transports, etc. All comprise the higher training in calming or stilling the mind-body. Their purpose, in other words, is to refine the elementary measure of calm affected by moral discipline. The ultimate goal is one-pointedness of mind, a powerful state in which all one's physical and mental faculties are completely stable and under the control of one's will. This is not a form of self-hypnosis. The meditator is stable, self-possessed, but also alert. Finally, prajna, insight, wisdom, the vision of things as they truly are. This is a perfect discernment or clear vision of reality, a mindfulness of how things truly are. It is intuitive in character, not conceptual, but also analytical in the sense that it disassembles reality to show its structure. In the Four Noble Truths, we saw that suffering depends on craving, craving ultimately upon ignorance. We also saw that impermanence is an implication of the dissatisfactory or painful character of all things. Buddhists extrapolate from these discoveries to a more general truth. They hold that no thing exists independently or substantively. This is the doctrine of dependent origination. A corollary of this doctrine is the Buddhist denial that any person is possessed of a soul or enduring self-identity. Yet Buddhists believe in rebirth. We must remember that Buddhism arose in the Hindu world, but let me show you how they believe in it. Assume that I have a candle in each hand and that this candle is lit. Is that the same flame? Assume that someone flicks a cigarette out of a car window into a dry forest. It starts a small flame. The flame becomes a fire. The fire becomes a forest fire. The forest fire becomes a raging forest fire over many acres. Was that the same flame as the original one? Was it the same flame as the one that lit the cigarette? Or was it simply a chain of causation? And that's how they look at rebirth. So far, we see no gods, nothing supernatural, not even a soul. Let's talk about Zen Buddhism, which begins in China around 520 CE. It is also one of the 2 main Buddhisms in Japan. Zen's classical characterization of itself, it is a special transmission outside the scriptures, which does not set up or depend upon anything else, which points directly at the human mind, by which Buddhahood is attained by seeing one's own nature. Zen's emphasis is on practice and experience, especially meditative experience or zazen, sitting in meditation, rather than theory or doctrine. The emphasis is so great that when a student achieves enlightenment, the Zen master's attitude is, "That's very nice, now get back to work and meditate." Of all the schools of Buddhism, Zen is most like atheism, or the most atheistic. During the development of Buddhism, there was a renaissance called the Mahayana movement, or the Great Vehicle. Mahayana Buddhism has all the trappings of saints and near gods, celestial Buddhas, and bodhisattvas. Now, humans become these things. A bodhisattva is someone who, in a few lifetimes, or the next lifetime, will become a Buddha. The object of Mahayana Buddhism is not nirvana, but to become a bodhisattva or a Buddha, to get enlightenment, and then stay around to help, or help somehow from some heaven. The other great Buddhism of Japan, Pure Land Buddhism, is one of these. Pure Land Buddhism depends on an old Hindu idea that things get worse and worse. At the time of Buddha, you could achieve enlightenment. Then there was the Second Age. You could do it, but boy, was it tough. Now we're in the Third Age. You can't do it by yourself. No way. But there was a bodhisattva named Amida who made a pledge. He said that he wasn't leaving until he could ensure that every living thing in the universe had a way to get there, to achieve enlightenment. And then he left. Well, he wouldn't have left unless he had a way to do it. So what he did was he established a heaven called the Pure Land. And if you pray to the Amida Buddha once in your life with real sincerity, if you bring him into your heart, particularly as you're dying, then you will wake up in the Pure Land as a bodhisattva, spend your time there, and become a Buddha. Somewhat like Christianity. Confucianism is a system of ethical precepts for the management of society. It's not at all supernatural. In conclusion, first, there really are major religions where all or most of the adherents do not believe in or do not worship gods or God. Second, we could conclude that for most of mankind's existence, most of the people in the world believed in religions that did not worship gods of any kind. During tens and thousands of years of prehistory, all were hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers in the past and today, for the most part, deal with local spirits, not gods. Gods come with cities and agriculture. For much of history, most of the human population has been in China, India, and Southeast Asia. In China, we find Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. In India and Southeast Asia, we find Buddhism, although we also find Hinduism and Islam. Some final notes. Even the Chinese that believe in the Chinese gods would rather not have anything to do with them. You don't pray to a Chinese god, you pray that they will never bother your doorstep. They're all seriously hostile. Second, Japan has a second non-exclusive religion. Buddhists coexist with Shintoists. Shintoism is actually a form of shamanism, believing in small local spirits. Finally, something Buddha himself said. Quote, "Believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, no matter if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense." That from the Buddha. I see that I have time left over, so how about some more readings from the Tao Te Ching? By the way, these come in more than one translation. There's a problem because Chinese is ideographic, so it expresses thoughts in characters which are not phonetics, they're ideas. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternal real. Naming is the origin of particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestation arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. What they're talking about is that, like many important religious concepts, or philosophical concepts, you can't talk about it, because if you try to talk about it, your tongue will wrap around your canine tooth and you'll babble. So the Tao that can be told is not the Tao. If you overesteem great men, people become powerless. If you overvalue possessions, people begin to steal. The Master leads by emptying people's minds and filling their cores by weakening their ambition and toughening their resolve. He helps people lose everything they know, everything they desire, and creates confusion in those who think they know. Practice not doing. Everything will fall into place. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Therefore the Master acts without doing anything, teaches without saying anything. Things arise, she lets them come. Things disappear, she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess, acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That's why it lasts forever. I think that's a pretty good description of Myolin's Vietnam Memorial. Although it would take a lot more to describe that memorial. It would be a lot of words. It probably wouldn't do as well as some of the short things in here. Tao doesn't take sides. It gives birth to both good and evil. The Master doesn't take sides. She welcomes both saints and sinners. The Tao is like a bellows. It is empty yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The more you talk of it, the less you understand. Hold on to the center. The Tao is infinite, eternal. Why eternal? It was never born. Thus it can never die. Why infinite? It has no desires for itself. Thus it is present for all things. The Master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. See, she is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she can let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will be blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to security, to serenity. Having done my work, it is now time for me to step back. This is Hugh Henry for Freethought Forum, talking about gods without religion. Thank you very much for tuning in.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny. Die Gedanken